Hello, I'm Tony, and welcome to the Tony Shap Show.
Well, hello, everyone. Today we have a special guest. I am super pumped to have her on the show with us. I can't wait for you guys to get a chance to meet her and to find out more about who she is, where she's been, where she is today, where she's going. So, Danielle, I wanted to give you a warm welcome on behalf of our audience and myself. Welcome to the Tony Shap Show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tony.
Right. If you want to take a second and just kind of tell people, what you're all about and your company and all that would be great to start.
Sure, yeah. My name is Danielle Strachman, and I run a venture capital fund called 1517. I started the fund 5 years ago after running the Teal Fellowship program under the direction of Peter Thiel for 5 years. And I always tell people that, if someone had asked me 10 years ago, would you be in VC? My answer would have been, what's VC? I didn't know anything about this industry. I wasn't working in tech at the time. I was an educator and a school principal. I did found a charter school, so I've done a lot of the operational work of getting something off the ground, but I could not have predicted that I would be in the seat that I'm in now. So one of my messages to people is always, you might think you know what your life is going to look like in the future, but not necessarily. But yeah, today I run a venture capital fund, and we mostly focus on the earliest stage pre-seed investing, and we fund people with sort of a novel thesis. Our thesis is to back people who have not garnered a college degree.
Awesome. Thanks for
Yeah.
letting us know. And what was that timeline like for you before you transitioned into as a VC? How long of a time did that take when you didn't know and then you found yourself in the role?
Well, it was, I've sort of either been on the founding team of things or founded things a lot. And so it's not that 1517 existed or we said, oh, we should sort of definitely do this and thought it out and made a leap. I mean, eventually we did make a leap, but it was more that my colleague and I were at the Teal Foundation for 5 years. We were seeing some amazing outcomes. People like Vitalik Buterin had launched Ethereum, people like Ritesh Agrawal with Oyo Rooms, Dylan Field with Figma, Laura Deming with the Longevity Fund. And we said, hey, we think that there's some great deal flow coming out of the Teal Fellowship. And one of our jobs was to try to connect Teal Fellows to capital. And what we found was that it was very hard to find investors, one, who would do early stage investing and who also saw young people as an investable opportunity instead of something like an intern. Mm-hmm. And so we went to our old boss, Peter Thiel, and we said, hey, we think there's a case to be made to put money into Teal Fellows companies. So we'd like to step away from our operational roles to do it. And he got really excited about it. He committed to us as a anchor investor on the spot. That's kind of the person who quite literally anchors your fund and gets you started. But it was a very long process of sort of thinking about, hey, should we do this? Should we step away? Does this make sense? And so on. And then, we had a lot to learn about not necessarily picking talent, because we had done that for a long time in the Teal Fellowship, but learning about what makes for an investable opportunity. There's a lot of people who are working on businesses that are really great, but the venture model is that you're looking to find businesses that can have an outsized return. And one way I like to frame it is that, if we invest in 40 companies, we expect at most one or two to be the companies that pay out the whole fund, which kind of makes up for the learning opportunities of all the other founders that we work with, where maybe they're not having an exit or the type of success that you would need to have in a venture fund.
Wow, that's in alignment with the 80-20 principle, right?
Sure, yeah.
That's wonderful. And I always like to let our audience know, that way they could be on the same page. I know we're hitting our stride and on this interview, but I always like to give a little taste to our audience who's listening, whether they're driving or they're watching this on YouTube or any other social media platforms. What's a one word that you could use right now to describe how you're feeling in this exact moment?
Yeah, in this exact moment, I would say grateful. I've been thinking a lot since, it's the new year, we're into 2021. And I was just kind of hanging out with myself the other day, and what popped into my head was that, everything that we have, we're not like owed anything. And so everything that comes to us in life is a gift. So I've been feeling very, very grateful the last few days, and in particular this moment as well.
Wow, that's really powerful. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. Let's move right along into your wins. Can you share with the audience a recent big win that you've had and what you learned from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this, well, in December, actually, one of our companies went public, and they're called Luminar Technologies. They build a LiDAR sensor for autonomous driving, and they have a contract with Volvo. And it's been pretty surreal, actually. That's the word that comes up there, is that we didn't expect this company to um, go public this soon. We thought if it did at all, we don't like to count our chickens before we hatch, and we're not particularly vain or grandiose. So we're like, okay, if they're going to go there, it'll probably be in another couple of years from now, not right now. And yeah, in the last month, they IPO'd, and I got up early and watched they got to open up the NASDAQ and ring the bell and do all that stuff. And it's been pretty incredible. I mean, we're a very early stage fund. We are often the first check into a company, and we get to watch a group of people go from being a team with a name, like, 5 people in a garage called Luminar Technologies, to becoming a fully fledged company, and now to watching them become a public company. And that's been very interesting to just see that, oh yeah, every day the stock is changing every day, and an announcement happens and this goes up, or something else happens and this goes down. And normally with our companies, it takes a few years in between funding rounds, and you say, oh, good, like, this company is pretty stable, this is what its price is, and so on. But when it's in the public market, it's a moment by moment change. And so it's a really big win for us to have our first public company. This is the thing that venture funds are predicated off doing, and wanting to hit a goal in that way. And I've talked to many funds who have wonderful track records, and they say, gosh, our company still haven't IPO'd yet, but we're getting there. And so to have this happen within the first 5 years is pretty extraordinary. And one thing that actually makes me really happy about this is that our thesis is working with people who don't have college degrees. And we do break that thesis every once in a while. I'd say like 85 to 90% of our founders don't have a college degree. But one of my fears was, what if our first big win is a company where the founder has a degree, but our whole shtick is about not having degrees? And I'm very proud to say that our founder, who started this company, we've known him since he was 17. He's only 25 now. He does not have a degree. He fits that thesis, and we're really helping to prove out over time that one path, that being college, is not for all. That's part of our mission. So it feels really satisfying to not only have a financial win, but also a mission-driven win as well.
That's really wonderful. And
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that with us. Reminds, like Mark Zuckerberg, right? He's not a college graduate either. He dropped out.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So the next thing, let's talk about failures on the flip side of that. What's
Yeah.
a recent failure, and what you learned from it? If you could share with us, that'd be great.
What do you think? So one thing that comes to mind is that, so when you have a venture fund, you have to, well, you don't have to, it depends on how you do it, but the model that our fund uses is that we raise multiple funds over time to back companies. And so we had fund one that started in 2015, and the deployment cycle on that is about 3 years. And then you go out and you raise another fund, and then after that you raise another fund and another fund. And we went out to raise our fund two in, gosh, I think we must have started fundraising in 2018-ish, at least sort of from a narrative point of view of like going out to our investors and talking to people. And it was just much harder to raise the second fund than the first fund. That was a really big learning for me. With our first fund, we raised all our money in 8 months from start to finish. And everyone kept telling me, this is unheard of. This is really fast. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, maybe we're just good. Like, who knows? And then we went out to raise our second fund. And what I found was that with our first fund, because we didn't have any sort of track record at the time, people kind of had to make a gut decision of like, okay, do I trust Michael and Danielle? Do I believe in this thesis? Is this going to be a yes or no? Whereas with the second fund, I think people had to have sort of like their head and their gut sort of in line of like, okay, is this a good investment decision? Because now we have 3 years of data on this fund. But that said, because we're an early stage fund, that 3 years of data is still very young data. And so even though internally we knew like, hey, our companies are moving forward. For example, Luminar was doing really well. We didn't know that 2 years later they would IPO per se. We didn't know it was going to be that good. But we had a track record of companies that were moving forward. One of our companies is called Loom. A lot of people use it right now, given that the whole world is, or most of the world is remote. And that's a video tool. But we would keep hearing from investors, oh, where's your big exit, or where's an IPO or something like that. And I was really surprised. I thought, gosh, I thought I thought this would all come together much faster, much more seamlessly. So that was definitely a wake-up call. I mean, we did raise our second fund. So I wouldn't call it like a failure in terms of that we didn't do it, but I think my expectation of how it would go was really not in line with reality. And I didn't have a way to figure that out earlier. So now when I sort of mentor other funds who are getting started, I'll, tell them the story of, yeah, hey, raising fund 2 is categorically different than raising the first fund. And I think raising our fund 3 will be much easier since we, now have those metrics under our belt. But yeah, it was a really big learning experience.
Thanks for giving us that insight. I would have never, been able to understand that inside that your world like that. So thanks for putting it in perspective for us.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So what's your best advice you could give to a startup founder? If you could only give, this is kind of off the shelf here, but if you could only give one single piece of advice for a startup founder that's like the perfect fit for you guys, what would that advice be? Would it be take the money, don't take the money, take the money if you need it, something along those lines? And there's no wrong answer here. Would it be like focus on growth, focus on, net, whatever that is? What is that? If you could only give one advice to that startup founder listening to this right now, what is that one advice?
Yeah, I guess like the first thing that comes to mind for me is that it's really all about team and the characteristics on the team at the beginning. And we meet a lot of people who are kind of starting out solo on what they're doing. And you really need to bring other people on board to fill in expertise. Often I'll meet people who say, oh, I'll hire out for this or hire out for that. But what they don't understand is that hiring out for other people is often more expensive than getting someone else who's really willing to sort of sit in the rowboat with you and do the very early stage work, usually for, lower pay, but a higher equity stake. And I always tell founders that, in our experience working with founders for the last 10 years, the people you found things with typically are people that you know or have worked with in the past. It's not that you met somebody at a mixer and said, oh, okay, we're going to start a company now. At least we haven't seen that work out too well. So I think another piece to that is having your founding team be everything you need to get started, but nothing more. Oftentimes I'll see teams where they're actually a little too big. Like, I'd say founding teams over 4 starts raising an eyebrow for me at the very earliest stages. I mean, eventually you need to grow bigger than that. But the hard part is that if you have superfluous roles, or sometimes, and this isn't true for all companies, but I think a lot of companies don't need like a CFO in the first 4 people. And so teams will come to me and, oh yeah, this is our CFO. And already I'm thinking, oh gosh, you're spending money on something that, this might be your friend or someone you've loved working with, but now is not the time to bring that person on board. So it's resources that are being kind of, I don't want to say misallocated, like in a negligent way, but it's just not the best use of your funds at the time. So you really need to have the right team and the leanest team you can have at the start.
That's beautiful. That's a really valuable tip that you just gave our listeners. And you're right. I mean, I couldn't help to think about when you were mentioning usually founders or someone that didn't know each other, they didn't find each other in a mixer. And it's so true. Looking back, they're either, college buddies or they met at NCL, or, it just depends, depends on the founders, right?
Sure.
Or they had a certain course they were in, or their graduate degree was on a certain thing, and they met that way off a project, and then they launched it. So that's so true. So how do you typically do people find you if they're looking for investment, or do you go out and find them? How does that process look like for you
It's
as the person writing
yeah,
that check?
it's some of both. And what we say is that um, we really want to build relationships with founders before we make an investment. And because we typically are working with people who are not getting a college degree, oftentimes they're younger. And so we can meet them before they're even thinking of themselves as a founder. So we'll meet someone at a hackathon, or we'll, they'll be in an entrepreneurship club and we'll be doing office hours. Um, and that's a great way for us to start getting to know someone over time, because when we meet someone at a hackathon and we can say, oh wow, look at this thing this person built over 36 hours, and um, they seem really talented in this way, we can start plugging them into community aspects that we have for the fund. Like, we have a very active Facebook group with about 1,800 young people in it. We have a newsletter that goes out fairly regularly, and it's just a way to start getting us in sort of in mind for them, so that at some point in the future, when they do say, hey, you know what, I think I'm going to start a company, we're the first fund that they call. And then in addition, one of the things I like to talk about is that the worst case for us is that someone comes to us on a Wednesday and says, I need money by Friday. Because with early stage funding, there's no data for us to look at. There's not, we're not saying to people, hey, send us your profit and loss statement. Maybe we're looking at some financials that they've modeled out, but usually the financials that are modeled out are on assumptions that aren't going to work anyways. So it's really all about that team, which is why I stressed team earlier as well. And so we really like to get to know those people over time and work with them either as a mentee or a grantee. We also give out grants as well. So a lot of it is outbound, but we also get a lot of referrals from people. We have a contact form on our website, which is 1517fund.com, where people can send in a proposal and say, hey, here's what I'm working on. Is this a fit for you guys? And we've funded quite a few people who have just cold outreach to us. We don't expect founders to have networks of investors, and especially because we tend to work with students a lot, we especially don't expect students to have that. So I know a lot of people are in the, oh, I want to get a warm intro, but we don't expect people to have that ability when they're early in their career.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
So now, if you could step into my shoes, what would you ask Danielle that I haven't asked yet? What is that one question that I should ask you?
I learned to ask that question. I used to work in a neuropsych department. We used to always ask that that question to clients. So I'm always using that question on people, especially founders. We talk about, like, is there anything I haven't asked that I should? And so I should be really ready for this. I'm trying to think, is there anything that you haven't asked that you should? Let me think about it for a second. There's nothing that's coming to mind right now. I guess maybe one question that comes to mind, I guess the answers are coming to mind for me, so I'm forming a question around it, but it's like, any other tips that you would give to founders? One I would say actually is that Twitter is a very powerful tool. I've met a lot of founders over Twitter in the last couple of years. It's also a event machine, and it can be a very negative place. So I don't necessarily recommend it in the warm fuzzy sense, but I do recommend it in the networking sense of, it's a great place to find other people who have similar interests, who are in the startup community, if you're in sort of like the startup VC Twitter arena. And I've just seen people use it really, really effectively. So I guess, yeah, that would be my, hey, do you have any more tips? And that would be my tip.
That's a good one. That's really good. And of course, like you said, if they're going to start using the platform for connecting and engaging with people, make sure that you have thick skin. That's what you said, basically.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's really great. So sadly, as we're coming to an end here, can you let our listeners know how they could connect with you if they have any questions, or they want to find out more about your fund, or how you guys invest?
Yeah, our website is 1517fund.com. We have our contact form there. I can be emailed at Danielle@1517fund.com. And on Twitter, I'm D Strachman, Strachman. And so, yeah, people are welcome to reach out.
Great. And the final question is the one word close. So what's the one word that you can use to describe how you're feeling at this moment?
Warm. I'll use that one. Nice and
Perfect.
sunny right now.
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you.
And there you go. I hope you enjoyed it, and great to have you, and thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode. Till next time, onwards and upwards.